just gonna introduce our speaker portion and then I'm gonna get out of the way. But the purpose of this discussion tonight is that we don't just watch a film and feel sad and then go back to our daily lives, which my fellow white women, we are a group that's known to do that, and we just go back to our lives and that's it. We don't want that to happen. We want to move into action, and there's so much that can be done. There are some incredible resources that Ihotu and others have pulled together that are linked. If you look at the front of your packet, I don't have one with me, but there's a QR code on the front of your packet that links to a web page that will be continually updated. Yeah. So there's tons of resources for you there. Some of them might be referenced by the speakers tonight. But what we want you to think about is just what action can you take moving out of this evening? And we know that will look different for everyone. So our first three speakers are up here. I'm going to do a quick intro and then I'm going to move away and hand it over. So Nadine right here is a doula and birth worker, activist, and Ihotu is our host from the Oshun Center. You want me to read? I'll read more. Let me read more actually.
Oh, they're short.
Sorry. Here we go.
I gave her 2 sentences and she said I had to give her more.
So
You did.
you can read along too. It's right here in your packet. Nadine Ashby is a queer trans birth worker, community perinatal educator, and lactation educator. They are also a founder of Birth Revolution, a queer and trans-led anti-racist birth work training. When Nadine is not attending births or learning more about body work, you can find them cuddled up with their 2 children. Their birth work journeys started with their mother taking them to births of family members and friends. They leaned into the incredible transformative power that birthing people unearthed at each birth they attended. This reverence led them to earn a degree in biology with the intention of becoming a nurse midwife. And you can find more information on Nadine's doula work at doulaforall.com. So big round of applause for Nadine. Thank you. You're welcome. So then next, just going along the line here, Ihotu Ali. I don't know what the MPH stands for. Sorry. Masters of Public Health. Yes, Masters of Public Health is an integrative cultural body worker and reproductive justice advocate. A graduate of Columbia University's School of Public Health, Ihotu worked with the United Nations on maternal health before becoming a doula in 2011. She spent a decade exploring Afro-Indigenous cultural practices for birth and wound healing before returning home to Minnesota and opening a holistic practice focused on the abdomen, womb, and pelvis care. Ihotu is the director of the Oshun Center, which is located here within the Family Tree Clinic, chiropractor, physician in training, evidence-based birth research editor, and an appointed member of the Minnesota Maternal Mortality Review Committee. You can follow her on Instagram at Ihotu Ali or connect with her, and her email is listed in the packet here. So big round of applause for Ihotu again. And then Jennifer Alamanza, Dr. Jennifer Alamanza has been involved in maternal child health for over 25 years. Her career started as a culturally centered massage therapist and doula and has transformed through work as a nurse in labor and delivery, NICU, and high-risk case management, and as a doctor of nursing practice working in health equity research, quality improvement, birth justice policy, and midwifery. She has served on several Minnesota state committees, and she is the current co-chair of the Maternal Morbidity and Mortality Committee and serves on the State Perinatal Quality Collaborative. She has also served on several community boards, including the Minnesota Cultural Birth Workers and Minnesota Healing Justice. You can contact her at her email, which is listed there. I'm not gonna read it off.
The emails
Yeah.
are there. Oh, yes.
Yes,
emails
the
are there.
Grano plastic.
Thank you.
And the emails are there so we can stay in touch
Yeah.
and keep this conversation going.
So I'm gonna start with the first question and then I'm gonna hand it off to you all.
Can we,
too.
before we ask questions, can we just get like how many people in the room are in public health, like show of hands, public health? And then how many people in the room are doulas? Awesome. And how about midwives? Nice. Doctors, physician's assistants, outside of the birth world entirely, outside of the birth world entirely.
And what brought you here?
Yeah.
I heard about it from Romy and my daughter.
Oh, my daughter made me come.
You were the first one to sign up, actually.
Nice. Oh,
Now
Yes.
it's a flower, right?
Yes.
anybody else who's outside of birth work?
I also do know Lily.
Okay.
But you
That's
know,
okay.
too, I actually received care from you while I was pregnant with my first, and
Oh, sweet.
I've been lucky enough to have 2 births at Ruth's Birth Center in North Minneapolis, and I'm trying to find ways as someone outside of the the work
Yeah.
to be involved. So I just amazed with everyone who does this work. I truly can't say enough about it. It's so important.
I shouldn't say outside of the work. I should say
Yeah.
who doesn't
We could
actively
say
do
who
birth
has
work.
children.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or, yeah, right.
Who has birth.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Anybody else who doesn't actively wanna?
I work for Minneapolis Heart Institute Foundation, and although I'm in the cardiovascular space, we're really seeking to understand how that impacts maternal morbidity and mortality as well.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So important.
I'm a retired nurse and been a public health nurse for a long time. But I also am with Healthy Black Pregnancy, iChirp. And
Yes.
so been trying to address maternal morbidity and mortality and infant mortality for a long time. I used to be on the infant mortality board,
Yeah.
lifetime board. So it's, for me, I'm hoping that we get a platform that things are changing. But this is not my first rodeo. I've been doing this for 45 years, and as it showed you on the graph, it's getting worse,
Yeah.
not better. And so if we don't change the mindset of the people that's working with our Black mamas and babies, then it's gonna get even worse. Because they're not listening to us. We've been saying this for a long time. So I don't know if white people need to listen to white people, but they don't listen to us. We've been saying this for a long time. So if the mindset doesn't change about the implicit biases, when you're working with people and discounting, when they tell you they're pain, the first thing you're gonna think you're a drug addict. See, then you may as well put a cross in it and stab them in the chest because you're killing them. Because you're coming with your own biases about people. So that has to stop. And so we need you to tell your other colleagues how to deal with us.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Bring the other speakers up now, or do you want to wait?
We'll bring them up in a few minutes. Yeah.
Start with our first question.
What other questions we can ask?
We've made some game time changes, so
Okay.
we're just.
It's a little different audience than we thought it would be, so we thought we'd be a little nimble and try to kind of pivot. Yeah.
Do you want to start by introducing yourselves and talking about why this issue is important to you? And then Ada.
Yeah, we can do that. Like Lily said earlier, my name's Nadine. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a birth worker, an anti-racist educator, and I've been kind of ushered into this work since I was a child. This work is important to me because Black people just deserve joy in every space. We deserve joy. We deserve to have joyous experiences just like anybody else. And I also do this work because dismantling our healthcare system that's built on, just the torture of Black people is ancestor work for me.
Mhm.
And so I'm not just doing this work because I'm affected by it, you know, I'm doing it because it also heals my bloodline and the bloodline of so many people who I, you know, are in my community. So that's why this is important to me.
Whew, I felt that. Yeah, my name is Ihotu. I use she, her pronouns, and I think why this is important to me. I was raised by a single mom, a white single mom, who had an incredible number of struggles, I think in part because she had Black babies. And that's a particular thing, I think, in Minnesota. We have a lot of mixed race families. And so that's just those racial dynamics are kind of, yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But I really, from, you know, growing up with, and my mom had special needs and my sister has special needs, and I was taking care of my whole family, paying rent at a very young age. Actually started working before it was I was like legally supposed to. And I just saw the really hard parts of being a parent really young. And also being a Black woman, I think I've struggled with feeling like myself, or receiving that idea from other people that I'm not ready to be a mom. Because to be a Black mom, to be a Black parent, you have to have all the things checked, right? There's a ton of pressure on Black people to be successful, to have all the things. And I think for me, I always laugh and say, so my dad's family is from Nigeria and I lived there as a baby. I would say, if I was living in Nigeria, I probably would have 5 kids by now, because I love kids, I'm a doula, you know, but they're their support. And here as a doula and as raised by a single mom, I saw how hard it can be for some of us. And honestly, that has contributed to a lot of fear. And I don't have children, partly because of life, but partly because I've always wrestled with how to live into that, right? That the stereotypes that are put on some of us, on all of us in different ways, but this particular stereotype. So I think I'm passionate about this work as like my way of giving back to community, and also like doing my part to create the change I want to live in here in the United States.
I kind of want to divert just a little bit from the question and say, yeah, I mean, my lived experience also, like I started doing this work with my friends, you know, my first birth was with my 16-year-old friend who was doing PSEO when I was 19. She's a Colombian woman, and, you know, started having babies very young. I had babies very young at 21. I have 3 kids. I've primarily raised them as a single mom as well. But where I want to divert from that is that I think that why we're pivoting on this conversation is because those of us who have that lived experience feel the timeliness, the necessity, the gravity, the pressure of this. And we've been at it for as long as we've been working, right? And 3 years ago, you know, institutions, not even 3 years ago, institutions started saying, oh shit, we have a problem. And it wasn't anymore, oh, so cute that you care about equity. It was, we got to fix this in our systems. And that's been a blessing and a curse for those of us doing the work, right? It's a blessing that people are waking up and are paying attention and are trying to make those big shifts institutionally. And it's a curse when we see our homies who have been doing this work for 25 years suddenly buried under the amount of work because these institutions are asking and taking so much of them and of their time. And so, so I do this work because I have to. It is a spiritual and soul commitment. And I do this work because I've met so many dope people along the way, right? And we keep each other, we give each other that joy. We keep each other going, and we remind each other, you know what? The people who are supposed to be here are here. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's an element of like, we're working so hard at it because other people are not. And we feel like we have to.
Yeah.
And we probably don't want to work as hard at it as we do. If we had more folks around us, we could be a little bit more tempered in what we do. Yeah, and that would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just adding on to that, you know, adding the kind of queerness and transness into this, which is just, it's already there and it's been there, right? But it can be really isolating because when we have these conversations, right, everybody's like the mamas and the women. And it's like, okay, all right, you know, but people like me are in the room as well. And so being one of very few Black, queer, trans folks in this work, in this state, you know, it can be exhausting. It can definitely be exhausting. But that's another reason why I'm here, you know.
And you
I have
shouldn't
to.
have to be one of very few.
Right, right.
Solutions, okay.
Yep.
So what solutions and projects are you working on that you'd like to share? Nadine, do you want to start?
Sure. So I, in the midst of, right, the whole uprising, you know, that's the neighborhood that I live in. I live a block away from George Floyd Square, so I'm just right up the street. And, you know, everything was on fire and stuff. And, you know, me and a fellow birth worker friend of mine were sitting and we were just thinking about how the birth community has responded to this tragedy that happened, you know, the murder of George Floyd, and how it was very, very clear that certain people were living in completely different realities with that. And it's like, in a way that if you weren't living here, it's hard to explain how like visceral that experience was. And so, you know, we got to thinking and talking about how in a lot of our training, it's like either, you know, you get the Blackness, right? You get the Blackness, you get the Black people talking about Black birth and, you know, cultural things, but there's an element of transphobia. There's an element of queerphobia, you know, or, you know, you get a little bit of queerness and transness included in things, but it's super white. And so you're dealing with racism and then in all of it, it's like, there's a sprinkling of fat phobia around, you know, it's just like, we were just like, I wish that we had something that, where we could learn and like learn from people who are experiencing these things, right? And really talk about it. And so that's where Birth Revolution was born. And so it is just becoming bigger and bigger and longer, to be honest. And so I've just kind of pulled people in, different birth workers in from the community who are kind of specialized in all of the different things. The people who can talk about fat phobia and how that has its roots in anti-Blackness, and the people who can talk about how do we enthusiastically love on and care for queer families and trans families. And also, I mean, there is portions in there that are just for white people, so that they can do they got their own healing that they gotta they got a journey to go on, you know, between them and each other and their ancestors, and even just learning how to connect with one another in a way that's meaningful. Because if they can't connect with each other, you know, it's like we're jumping ahead of ourselves, expecting anyone to be able to connect with us in these spaces. And so, yeah, Birth Revolution, it's a very big project.
How could someone connect with you if they were interested in training with you?
Yeah, so the birthrevolution.org is where you can get in contact with us. Yeah, you know, we're hoping to have a cohort early next year, and yeah, we'll see. Through Birth Revolution, we also do some training and like consulting stuff. So there's been a couple of small businesses that we've worked with about how do you enthusiastically welcome all kinds of people into your spaces. And we've been kind of going back and forth with some of the bigger healthcare systems, talking with, you know, Mother Baby Center and stuff like that. And, you know, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't know. We'll see.
And small systems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doing it all.
All
Yeah.
kinds of systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. And then I also do work with a nonprofit called Seeds Worth Sowing, which was started by one of my doula clients. Yeah, I was there for both her babies.
Okay. She's on our referral list.
Yeah, she's just wonderful. And so through Seeds Worth Sowing, we distribute like physical resources, so like diapers, wipes, cleaning supplies and stuff for folks. We also do some groups for Black people where we just try to have as much joy as possible. We just be having a good time. And I think that's really important because so many of the Black spaces that are curated are just like so heavy, you know, and like we're talking about how terrible things are, which, you know, it's not good.
But then
It's not
for sure.
Yeah.
Goes up.
Yeah.
But it's so important to have spaces that are just dedicated purely to joy. And, you know, we learn some things along the way. We learn about how to advocate for ourselves in these systems and stuff. But the bottom line is, how can we create real joy and connection? Yeah, so that's kind of what I do. And I guess, I mean, my doula work, you know, that's a solution. I'm working with families all the time. Most of my families are Black and brown folks, queer and trans folks. Yeah, so those are all the things.
I mean,
What do you want to talk about?
I mean, I think I'm supposed to talk a little bit about the systems work that I do on the Maternal Mortality Review Committee. And I will say that, as some of you may or may not know, the first mortality review report was published. The data is old. It's 2017, 2018. There are a lot of limitations. We did not have our tool that helped inform us about whether or not the cases were as a result of racism. There were some issues with how we were understanding substance use deaths. I'm giving myself literally 2 minutes because I really do want to get to solutions in the audience as well. But these committees are honestly more new than any of us would care to admit. All right. And the process that we are using now is incredibly new in the past couple of years. It's the first time that it's been standardized across the country. We have a database, so we're measuring things and speaking the same language, finally. And I always, you know, remind my coworkers and colleagues and people around, like, this is women's health, right? Like, this is women and birthing people's and people with uteruses health, and it's been overlooked and overshadowed for many years and just not attended to, hasn't been attended to. And so that work, that is amazing.
Oh my goodness.
That is, he made a whole mural.
Wow.
It's a whole mural.
It's a story.
That's amazing. Wow. Wow, sorry. Okay.
Brilliant. So brilliant.
So brilliant. So we're learning as committees, as these little baby committees as we go. And I will say one thing that I'm really, really proud of about our committee in Minnesota is that we truly do have a very diverse committee. And I'm not just saying like racially diverse, I'm saying thinking diverse and you know, what people are doing with their careers diverse and things like that. And because of that, I think it's been a little bit, well, no, I don't think. I've been on this committee now for 4 years. It's been a little bit, and I've watched it grow and develop. And as our committee has gotten more, you know, diverse, the conversations have gotten a lot more, you know, like trying to figure things out and kind of trying to bring people along the way and teach along the way. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I feel like the people on the committee want to do that work and want to learn and know that we need to do better, right?
I think I might just chime in a little
Go
bit
ahead.
too, is that part of this, we wanted to have a film screening, but we also wanted to kind of do something about this new report coming out, which not every state has reports out.
Right.
Like you can't look up New York State to just pull it up, right?
Right.
So that's something unique that Minnesota is doing, is actually making the data public. So possibly if some folks out of this group want to kind of work on some coalition work and, you know, need data, that's something that we can turn to. But I think what's hard about being on the committee also is these people have already passed away and we see what went wrong. But I also want to bring into this conversation, especially for the providers in the room, whether it's you or you are going out and talking to your colleagues, what can we do in real time that's changing things now so that we're preventing deaths, not just reacting and giving out recommendations about deaths that already happened.
Yeah, and honestly, you know, the report from 2017, 2018 looks very different from what we're reviewing right now.
Yeah, because we have COVID.
Well, because of COVID, but also because the substance use disorder issue has like popped off like crazy. Like we have a real big problem that is the most intersectional, difficult issue to address. And of course, it's impacting our Native and our Black populations more than anything. And all of our solutions need to be centered and based in those communities. And all of them need to be centered and based on people who have experienced that problem and who can help to inform us of what has helped, right? And so that's some of the other work that I'm doing. I'm way past my 2 minutes, so I'm gonna stop and let Ihotu talk. And yeah, and then
I feel like it might
so
be
many awesome people here.
a good segue to bring up, is Hadija still here?
Yeah, we got.
So we wanted
Amazing
to
people.
bring up a few other folks, and I think it's a good timing to talk about. One person's going to talk about community conversations that are based in those communities, as well as how to get at the challenge that often comes up in the MMRC meetings, which is, so this person passed away, was it racism related? How do we determine when no one's saying, it's not a symptom you can check off, no one's saying it, people are even unaware it's happening. And how do we look back with whatever medical records we have and figure out? And being able to say this was racism related is how we get the data to do some of the work, right? So I want to invite Corenia and Rhonda and Hadija up. There are seats for you to speak. So we want you to get a sense of what is already happening here that you can plug into, that you can tell people about, that might need more support, or just to know when you hear something, oh, I need to connect you with someone I met at that event, you know, so we have each other's contact, we're in communication.
How's this doing? Is it capturing everyone?
I'm like, it's fine. It's just on Ihotu.
Can you all hear us? Can someone chime in and say like, I see public health nurse here, okay. That was probably 10 years ago. Let us know if it's not working. Okay. All right. Do either of you want to speak first? Yeah.
Sure. Hey, y'all. My name's Hadija. I use they, she pronouns. I'm wearing, I think, a couple hats today. One is for the Center for Anti-Racism Research for Health Equity at the University of Minnesota. Another one is outside of the university system. I'm the founder of the Healthcare Reparations Cooperative as well. Oh, and I guess another really important hat is also I'm a parent of twins, non-gestational twins. It's a long story, but it did give me a really important insight into disparities firsthand as a Black, queer, genderqueer human who was married to a white, queer woman, cis woman. And we had parallel pregnancies, and so we were able to see actually firsthand, week for week, how the disparities go. So maybe someday I'll write a book about it, about how screwed up it was. So wouldn't recommend it, but yeah, that's another hat that I'm wearing. So that's me in a nutshell.
And can everyone hear in the back? Okay, good.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Corenia. I use she, her pronouns for folks that can't see me. I am a darker skinned chocolate woman with glasses. I have starting dreadlocks just about a month and a half in, and I'm wearing black. And I am here representing the Birth Justice Collaborative, which is a sheet that I just passed out to folks. If folks are part of the Oshun newsletter and got the materials prior to this as well, there's information that went out via email. But we're part of a collaborative of community orgs that are really trying to figure out, particularly for the Black and Indigenous community, what are some birthing justice strategies that we want to have implemented across the county. And having community conversations, which are the materials that you see, some convenings happening, launching in November, both in person and virtual, to really figure out what it is that folks want to have implemented and recommend for strategies.
So if someone wants to help spread the word, those meetings start next week, right?
Yes.
So if you know anyone who fits in those categories who could join, send them a note in the next couple days to invite them to.
Yes, please do. They're culturally specific. So the 9th is for the American Indian community, the 10th is for the Black community, and the 16th is intercultural, so for both. And yes, please spread the word for folks that either are part of maternal and infant wellness and care, or they themselves have experience. Yes. The ones in November are all in person. The ones in December are virtual.
It's going to be really good work.
Yes.
It's going to be really good work. Yeah.
I'd love to share more too if folks want to connect.
Yeah.
So these are like bite-sized pieces. There's so much we could talk about. This is just to kind of give the overview. Again, if you go to that very fancy QR code and pull up the resources, all of these projects are listed there and you can connect with folks. And then I wanted to pass to you, Rhonda.
Do people virtually have access to that document?
Yeah, so we've sent out those electronically to anyone who has registered. If you haven't registered, you haven't gotten it for any reason, email Oshun Center and we can send it out to you. Yes.
For those of us who do not have a phone that can take a picture and do this, how can I get the information?
It's on our website. Or I can email you. Okay, I know you use email. All right, great.
I'm Rhonda. I am a birth doula, childbirth educator, lactation person, pelvic steam facilitator. You should be steaming your pelvic floor. Everybody, that would be everybody. That is like
There's a steam room.
As much as I think birth work is my birthright, I think telling people about pelvic steaming is part of what I was created to do.
Get us right. Get us together.
Yeah, so I also created a doula training during COVID, and I really believe it's really important that we stop using trainings that are not actually targeted for supporting the community. And so Nay's training is going to take you all the way in. My doula training, we have added some bias work in there for racial bias, but also LGBTQ plus bias in birth. And it's just so important that we are talking about these things as birth workers. So it doesn't matter where you work in the birth spectrum. If you don't get it, you should just like take a break from work, get a little sabbatical and get yourself together, because we're killing folk because we want to actually. So, and so that's a part of my work. And I'm gonna do some training with Nay, fighting the system. And then I, in the past year or so, have been working with Beck, which is a birth equity. That's where I know you. It took me a minute. Through Ramsey County to address this topic in different ways. And the committee I'm on is focusing on doula work. And one of the things that we recently finally were able to accomplish was getting the doula registry, the Minnesota Department of Health doula registry changed. A piece of it, actually. It's a bigger issue, but tackling one piece at a time. And so that's, if you work in policy or have the ability to address the nonsense that is Medicaid reimbursement for doulas, we would love for you to also help in that process, because that's something that both of us are also working on. And it's just, we don't truly want to help families of color if we are not actually trying to fix these things that cause the barriers and the blocks. And so we keep saying we want, and we have declared it as in our state, in our community, that it's whatever the declaration is that people probably don't actually believe that, even though they declared it, because they haven't fixed the things to make this stuff not keep happening. And I don't care to sugarcoat that, because we can't say we're about wanting people to stop dying if we're not actually, the way we're living, the things we're doing is not helping that. And so that's a part of my work, to say those things just like that.
Just like that.
And a bag
like that.
Yep. Well, and on that, you're mentioning doulas. I'm also thinking reimbursement for midwives is terrible. Reimbursement for birth centers is terrible. Reimbursement for chiropractors is terrible. Acupuncture is.
Reimbursement for home birth midwives is non-existent.
Yeah, it makes me think
Make less than we make.
that it's actually like, you don't pull one part of the weed, you have to get to the bottom of it. And so it really makes me think about, this next question we want to ask is about what are our magic wands? Where's my hat? Put it back on for 5 minutes. Our magic wands for change. Okay, that was enough.
Yeah.
No, wait. No, they need to see it.
I'm doing it. Okay. Yeah. Like if we had, hold on. There we go. If we had magic wands, how would all of this would have been created differently, right? So we watched in the film where he talked about, we had these traditions of midwifery that could have been updated and added to have been even better than they had been. Add in more, more medicines, and instead they took away a lot of the power of that medicine and made it into an only book. I'm not against books, but why are we subtracting? Why aren't we adding and kind of deciding collectively what's the best way to do this? So I think a lot about who decided to make it only a biomedical model. Who decided that pharmaceutical was more important than body work, right? And how do we go back to getting at the root of, we can't change everything tomorrow, but in the next 20 or 200 years, we could, because that's how we got here, was 100 years ago. It was dramatically different, and people made choices for it to be how it is right now. So we can make choices that we might not see, but the next generation might see, right? And so my next question is, if you had a magic wand, so I'm getting really excited over here. But
Yeah,
like,
that's good.
we had a magic wand and we're kind of playing with this idea of like, is it feasible? Also, is it possible? Like play in that in-between space. We can't change everything in a day, but like if we got enough people fired up, and we've seen our people fired up, right? We know what fired up feels like, and we know what like burnt out feels like. If we get back to that place of fired up and sustainably fired up, what could be possible in a month from now? Small. What could we do actually? For those in this room, what could we do in a month? December. What small things could have already changed? What about November 2023? If we were all to come back into this room, what could be different for at least some people in some spaces a year from now? And then go on, let's say 10-ish years from now. Think where we were 10 years ago. When was that? 2012. I was still in grad school. Yeah. Some people were like pregnant. Things have changed. How could things change 10 years from now? And so on this panel, we kind of want to toss out some of these questions. We want you to also think, and you have paper and pens, hopefully they're around. If you can, as we're also sharing ideas here, write down, maybe a month is easier for you to think about something I can just do kind of right away. Maybe a year, maybe you're a long-term thinker, like I'm thinking like way ahead. I'll be like, okay, 200 years from now. But we need everyone. We need all those levels to get there.
Yeah.
I want to just read one little thing about Oshun Center, and then I'll pass the potato. Does someone have the panelists? But yeah, I want to read one little thing that's in there.
Oh, yeah.
So the mission, the vision of the Oshun Center is to build and bring integrative cultural healers into every health center, and the principles of healing justice and reproductive justice into every treatment room. So that's how I'm starting to think, with the guidance of like coaching and stuff, like starting to think about how are we not just changing one small piece, but we're actually like doing the long-term work of reformulating, training people differently, putting healers into those places so they can rub up against and be seen for what they bring in those spaces. And then I'll just read from this article in Minnesota Women's Press, just to kind of do a little bit of that vision work. If you want to kind of take a breath, let your mind wander, let your eyes close if that's comfortable for you, and just imagine. I invite you to travel with me into the future, into a new era of care that the ancestors call us to imagine. Here exists a tender, motherly, nurturing relationship between doctors and their patients. In this era, the doctor brings wisdom about the body, and the patient brings wisdom of their symptoms, their story, their priorities. The doctor is a consultant, offering a menu of options and a teacher, from the Latin word docere, to teach, helping the patient learn and make choices. But the doctor is calm, unrushed, and trusts that their patient knows best. I just think that's where for me, that's where we start. So I'll open up to anyone who wants to speak to future, even specific tangible solutions. What?
I mean, I have many, and one of the things that I really struggle with this is that one of the first things that comes to mind with system work is reimbursement. And that is so linked to capitalism, and capitalism is what got us here in so many ways. And so that's a really hard piece for me, because we know that part of this broken system, it's also broken for the providers, right? It's broken when you have 15 minutes to see a birthing patient, and in some community clinics, a birthing patient and their baby in 15 minutes. And you know you have 15 people waiting for you, right? And they're all waiting with babies, and it's, you know, and I want to say that in my own practice as a midwife, the people who were closest to me and sought me out, I know that they had a sacred birthing experience in hospitals, and I know it can be done. I know it can be done. It was certainly not everyone, because you don't have the luxury of, you know, having that really time to build relationship. And I think so much of this is truly rooted in relationship. I mean, how much more intimate of a relationship can you possibly have with somebody than entrusting, you know, your reproductive health to that person, be it for, you know, contraception or abortion counseling or abortion or, you know, birth or adoption or whatever it is that you've chosen. And the fact that that is the way that system is set up, I mean, so that's one of the pieces. But the other big piece that I think of in 10 years, and this is like really, I don't want to make this political at all, but I need to say that especially with our patients who are really, with our families that are really struggling with substance use disorder, that there is nothing in place in our society. There is no income that somebody can rely on when they're trying to remedy that situation for themselves. Every birthing person wants, you know, to have respect and wants to have a healthy baby and a healthy pregnancy, and wants the best outcomes for themselves and for their baby. And yet there is nothing to support that while they go through their process of healing themselves and healing that disorder. So there are a lot of really big picture things that if I could wave my magic wand, it would be to support families so that if people choose to have a baby, that they can raise that baby the way they want to and also have the help that they need. Substance use disorder didn't just come out of the blue, right? This is a maladaptive coping situation, and there's a lot to try to cope with in the world right now. So I guess that's, yeah, my soapbox. And I will say I've personally had 2 friends within the last year and a half, both from the Indigenous community, who have lost their adult children and are raising their grandchildren. And it's pretty awful. Yeah. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on like in a month?
Yeah, I mean, in a month.
Or
Maybe go to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to somebody else.
yeah.
I'd love to
Yeah.
piggyback. I think one maybe shorter term is, as you're talking about substance abuse disorder, like language, the way in which language is actually sometimes a barrier to even addressing the problem. Substance use disorder is relatively new. Like that's new language in terms of talking about substance abuse or users or drug addicts, et cetera, right? And people weren't interested in taking care of folks, right, when we were using that language. And now it is a substance use disorder in a crisis that is being addressed. I think about that when we talk about racism being a public health crisis now. Now folks are interested in figuring out the disparities, how do we address it, you know, policy changes, et cetera. And so I think language is a relatively short-term thing that we can definitely
Absolutely.
pivot to. And if
Yes.
I'm hearing birth justice, you know, I think that that's something that maybe could take hold. And I think is also like pretty accurate and
capturing what we're looking for. It is birth justice. We are trying to figure that out. And while I would say, I don't have a definition, I think community gets to define that, but language. And then I think another one, longer term, that I still think could happen soon, would be, I recently watched Weathering, the play at Penumbra. I hope folks get a chance to go see it. And they mentioned a study where folks who have, BIPOC folks, Black and brown folks who have a Black and brown provider do not experience the same disparities at the same scale, even within the same system. And I want to find that study, so if anyone knows it, send it to me, please. Great. And so I'm like, when I think about, Indian health boards, when I think about Black and brown birth centers and clinics that are owned and run by BIPOC folks, we don't even actually have the capacity to fill the positions. I think it would be amazing to have a way for Black and brown folks to get trained at a high level as providers, as clinicians, to care for our community without having the debt, without having the barriers, to actually be able to do this at the scale, because it is an institution. And same in the movie, there's one brown person with a field of white folks, and that's not even Minnesota. I always keep that context of like, yes, that's sometimes representative of Minnesota, but in actuality, there are so many folks who can be trained to provide the care that we need, and there are shortages. So how can we remedy that as well?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
The next line in that kind of vision story was saying that doctors were chosen by community, like appointed by community, and then paid a stipend to go through school because it was their job to come back to the community afterward.
Wow.
Yeah. That's like a 50-year one.
No, next year.
But so I think like with this future visioning, there's something really to be mindful of. Like there's these two ways to view. You look forward and you look present. And I think one of the things that we really need to figure out is how to now make them talk to each other. I think that's kind of your point. But like, so one of the projects that I was working on, we're about to have all this data around all of the shit that's happening for Black, Indigenous, BIPOC birthing people in their life and preceding death. But then when we have all this information, how do we actually get that to the solutions now, and not just because that's we can push that forward and say like, great, we can see a future facing solution, but we actually really need it to not just be somebody's story that just gets wrapped up in a bow and says, great, we said thank you for your time and move on. So I think that's the year-long goal that I'm really hoping for and dreaming of, is how do we actually connect those two faces to be able to talk to each other easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. I have a short-term one too. Go for it.
I would say, so I think that my short-term one is just to challenge people to examine their empathy and think about the ways that your history has impacted your ability for empathy, your capacity for empathy, and who you're able to have empathy for. I think that's like a very short term, like something that can be meditated on every day, because we talk about how being enslaved for a long time, impacts our cells, our genes. It has changed us. It has impacted us, but people don't really talk about like the ways that that period of time, which is like very recent, has impacted colonizers.
Yes.
Like this has radically impacted folks. And unless they're really thinking about it regularly and talking about it amongst themselves and recognizing, drawing the dots between then and now, it's just, it's hard to take another step forward, you know, without that piece.
There's been studies that show that in your brain, you actually feel someone else's pain viscerally, physically, more so when you identify with that person, right? And you actually don't feel the pain as much of someone who you don't identify with.
Yeah.
So there's like a biochemical thing here. We don't all see each other the same. And I guess you can ask why, and you can also actively work against that to retrain yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not only for white people, you know, we see anti-Blackness is across cultures, across the world. And so it's important that we all are thinking about that. And I think that's a short-term goal. I mean, it's a long-term goal because it never ends, but you can start now. And I would also say, you know, talking about education, you know, as I'm thinking about going into this nurse midwife thing, child,
Moment of silence.
right, please.
I'm gonna cry.
So, yes, absolutely. Black and brown people should not have to pay for schooling
No.
at all whatsoever. We shouldn't have to drop a dime. But the whole education system has to be completely flipped on its head. It has to be completely taken out and completely redone. Because, I mean, there was a study out, I'm not sure when, but they talked to medical students, and these medical students were reporting that, yes, I believe that Black people's skin is thicker than white people's skin. So you have to be more, you know, you gotta be rougher. You gotta be rougher with Black people because their skin is thicker. And it's like,
pain medication, but they tolerate pain.
right, they don't feel pain the same way that white people feel pain. They don't, you know, and it's like, where are we getting that from? It's not coming out of thin air. People aren't just born like, you know, growing up like, yeah, that's how it goes. And so I think we can't toss Black and brown people into these systems and expect them to change things when these systems themselves, the schooling itself, the hospital healthcare system itself is violent. You know, you're just gonna end up burning more people out and killing more Black and brown folks, just killing them a little slower. So, you know, that's my 2 cents.
Sorry. Is everyone okay to stay like 5 to 7 minutes more, just so we can kind of,
Or leave if you're not, it's fine.
oh, that's true.
But I mean,
We're gonna
talk.
try to wrap this up.
Right, my bad.
No, it's okay. But like, also, this is exactly it. Like the fact that the time is here. I understand if people have, I understand people have families and things they need to do, but also when the clock becomes more important than what's in front of you is exactly why we have this problem. So, I mean, if you have to go, I completely understand. I will not. But I also like invite you to like allow 5 minutes, because those 5 minutes might mean now we can have a real closure, and, you know, just tidbits of like how this plays out with all of us. So, and I want Ron to be able to speak, and I've got a bunch of handles I need to tell you about. Go for it.
For me, a super short solution is accountability. We don't have it. And I can be a provider who abuses Nadine. And Nadine can write a report with my name on it. And next week, I'm going to see Ihotu because I still have my job. And then in a couple more weeks, I'm going to see Delane.
Yeah.
I'm going to screw her up because that's the type of work I do. And then, you know, next month, I'm going to see Corenia. We don't have accountability, you know, and as doulas.
And we don't even know what happened to Nadine.
And we don't. We also don't know if anything happened to me behind closed doors. But what it looks like to the community is these systems actually are not listening to us because we don't know if you had a meeting with this person.
Yeah.
And even if you had a meeting, do they not have unpaid time off? Right? We don't have accountability. As doulas, some of us don't go to certain hospitals. Like if you're pregnant and you say, hey, I'm birthing at such and such, I'm gonna say, I don't go there. And then when you say why, and I tell you, but I really like my doctor, so I'm gonna go anyway. Okay, would you like me to try to find you another doula? And so, but the accountability, the community knows, especially the birth community, the least safest hospitals to birth at. The community knows the least safest freestanding birth centers to birth at. The community knows, but the accountability from the people who can actually make decisions within the systems is not there. And if any of you who work in birth, you could point out the people on your team that are a piece of crap.
It's true. Bad apples are everywhere.
You know who they are, and you know they're still working. What are we doing to remove them from continuing to harm people? Accountability is lacking.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
So I would like to say, so many things. Yeah. Rhonda, that's such a good point. I mean, I wanna plug like the Earth app here in this moment too.
Yes.
Like there are few organizations that are looking at this piece around accountability, and here's a way to tie it in. So
Earth is IRTH.
there we go.
And it was created by a Black woman whose her work is breastfeeding, Black breastfeeding. However, she created this app during COVID. And so every person that you know who's had a baby, especially if they're Black, but every person you know who've had a baby during COVID, let's send them to the Earth app to put their stories.
If you aren't familiar with the Earth app, yeah, IRTH, look it up. It's very, I mean, if you work in a hospital that has no, I think they're doing partnerships with hospitals too. So I don't know about here in Minnesota, but
They haven't gotten in Minnesota.
yeah,
but
I'm sure there's some.
let's bring them.
But
Earth
I'll
is
just say
birth
that-
without the B. I'm sorry.
Right.
Earth is birth without the B for bias.
We dropped it.
B for
You got
dropping the
it.
B for bias.
You got it.
How do I say they
It's
dropped
a
the
little-
B for
You got
bias?
it. You made it there.
I know, it just
That's all that matters.
So I work with evidence-based birth, and we have many of the studies and the Earth apps and the different organizations that we've talked about. You can find the studies once this article goes public next year. So if you're interested in having access to this article, it's called The Evidence on Anti-Racism in Healthcare and Birth Work. It's a lot of data, and our focus is shifting from statistics to solutions. So there's a stream of all the different organizations. If you don't know all the organizations, it's okay. It's a lifelong journey, but we're going to be opening up like a 6-week course that would go to your email in case you want to continue learning. And the big thing about kind of our advocacy at EBB is like, you just have a regular practice. I think that would be my short-term 1 month wand idea would be, if you don't already have, if you identify as an ally in the room, like you don't already have a practice of like reading a book on a regular basis, meeting with a group to keep talking about these things, having some ongoing touch point, that's a really easy thing to just start doing. We haven't decided what we're doing, but we've decided we're going to keep caring about it, and we're going to stay engaged in what does that like rhythm and schedule look like. That can happen on your own. And also we found it really helpful when people do that together, and there's a little bit of facilitation, which is how the Sweetwater Alliance came about, which is why we were plugging it earlier, that it funds the clinic, and it also is like a regular group that you can use to keep engaged on and be like, I found this thing, what do I do? I heard there's a thing happening, how do I plug in? We have a lot of community connections, so it's a really good place to kind of keep coming back to stay in the work. I just wanna name a few handouts. If you have not heard of Dr. Rachel Hardiman's at the U of M Care Center, free training for anyone It's online. It's called Dignity in Pregnancy. It's a beautiful, awesome evidence-based training. It takes an hour or so to get through. If you're a provider, this should be required for all of your team. That can be done in a month or a couple months. Absolutely should be required. It's excellent training, specifically around birth. And this anti-bias strategies are all evidence-based strategies, conversations you can have, how to use we statements, how to make sure we remember we're on the same team. That's something that comes out of that training. This is just some stuff about pelvic shapes, the history of pelvic shapes. You can read about that.
Read about the pelvic shapes, please.
And then this, I know we had a few back there and they're gone, and I didn't print many because it's a lot of paper, but this was kind of what the point you're getting to, was like crossing that present and future gap. Part of so we'll be talking more about this chart when the Sweetwater Alliance meets on Saturday. We're having one of our monthly meetings on Saturday. That's a shameless plug. If anyone's thinking about maybe joining tonight and you want to join, and Rebecca Decker, the founder of EBB, and I will be on. We'll be talking through the what is it called? The Black Birthing Bill of Rights. Each of those ideas, I deserve the right to X. This chart talks through, where are we now? How much do we actually have access to that now? And what specific things have to get done to get there?
If you're a provider and you've never heard of the Black Birthing Bill of Rights, please Google that.
Yeah. So I don't have the one that somebody has like this in the room, but I'll pause there. That's a lot of information. If anyone wants to chat afterward, I'll stick around. Yeah.
I'm wondering if I can just share a conference that's coming up. The Minnesota affiliate of the American College of Nurse Midwives is hosting a conference, and there's tickets available, and there are also discounted tickets, or free tickets if it's financial need is a need. But a lot of the topics might be interesting for people. Rhonda's on the committee with me. I'll just quickly go through the day, but there's an Ojibwe midwife during the day who's going to talk about she's like I think a third generation midwife, and she's going to talk about her indigenous history and practices, and I think that's going to be really powerful. And then to the stigmatizing language, that's one of the topics for the day. There's a Hmong writer talking about her experience of perinatal loss in Minneapolis. And then there's an abortion panel kind of talking about abortion access and abortion healthcare, as well as a discussion about hypertension in pregnancy. So I thought some of you might be interested in attending. If you just Google Optimal Outcome conference, it's November 11th.
Okay.
And you can also ask Rhonda for the link to, or
Thank you.
can I throw out that the tool being released?
Yeah.
The first tool to be used by MMRCs nationally to name racism and discrimination as an influencer in maternal death is set to also be published this coming year. And even though it is intended for use by abstractors, it is also a really important teaching tool as well. So I think it's something that all folks will be able to get a lot out of once it's actually released. So stay tuned for that.
Can we just all take a collective breath before we leave this space, just to recenter and reground? I feel like that's your jam. You wanna do
Is it?
Okay.
I feel like I was all crazy there for a second.
Standing or sitting or whatever.
Yeah. Maybe we can just notice where our hands are. Like, okay, hands, shoulders. I actually I like this tapping on the sternum as well to just bring us back to kind of our heart core area. So maybe just take a few seconds of silence and listen to your own heartbeat and the tapping of those around you if you're tapping. Letting the silence be comforting. Noticing where our pelvis is in space, our legs, pelvic floor. I just want to honor all that has come up. This space has held a lot in the last few hours. Our bodies, our nervous systems have held a lot and gone through these peaks and valleys, and hopefully it was all for good. Hopefully it was all for protection of ourselves and ourselves. And I just have a wish for everyone in this room to come out of this space with one good deep breath. With one genuine smile or eye twinkle. One genuine connection with someone in the space. And one thing that's percolating as your one action, your commitment that you'll take out of here, whether that's to yourself, if you need to turn that to yourself internally, or if this, you're being asked to turn your attention elsewhere. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.